Hey, welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesday. And look at how adorable we are up in the corner of your screen. Aw. I don't know what happened to me, though. I look a little...
Yeah, what happened to you there, Matt?
You know what? I wanted to say, hey, I don't look like that. And then I located a mirror. So thanks for joining us on the 12th. It is now 7 p.m. Eastern. We're live. If you're catching this later, where were you? We needed you. But we're glad you're here now. So we are rounding up the week's kind of tech news and kind of putting them together in little crushed ice pellets, because that's the best kind of ice, and feeding it to you because you really wanted the ice. You didn't even care about the drink. And with that, let's get started.
Yeah, so the first thing that we have today is something that I find very interesting, but also something that I've heard about people doing or companies doing with very sensitive information. So this comes in wake of the SolarWinds hack that has Russia ties, if you hadn't caught that before. But the SolarWinds hack has affected over 250 different government agencies and private companies. So it wasn't just targeted on the federal things. But the federal judiciary system in the United States was a big target of it. And they're not exactly sure how far the hack got. So like how far deep, or what kinds of documents it actually got to, things like that. So it's not, they're not taking any chances, basically, is what's happening. So they're adding a ton of friction, even in a COVID world, that things have to be hand delivered. So sensitive documents. So this doesn't mean like documents that are just like regular sealed documents or anything like that. This is like explanations on how the investigators actually worked the case. People that could actually be like under surveillance, things like that are very sensitive, that would not actually come out in a sealed court record. Those are the types of things we're talking about. So we're not talking about like court records, things like that. That's all going to be still electronic. But some of these sensitive information documents are going to be either handed via like actual paper or via USB sticks, which I think is such a throwback. But also, if you're putting it on a computer that's infected, they can probably still get it. So I don't know what they're thinking there either. But yeah, so I found this really interesting, just because I know that attorneys will actually keep like hard copies of things as well in their filing systems. They're doing something very similar here. And so, yeah, I just found this really interesting that we're going low tech, so to speak, and using actual paper documents for once.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. That so to your point, we're not talking about like the things that the public would access online, right? Like, so you can still submit things, and that still works correctly.
Yeah, all of that's still going to work fine. This is more for cases that are actually getting tried currently, that the information would not actually ever be released publicly. So like in a court record, like all of that is public. So you would be able to like go in, search those, research them, do whatever you need to do based on why you're looking at them. These are documents that you would never really actually be able to see in one of those records. So so it's really just making sure that information stays private in the way that it has been intended. Because again, we don't know how deep this hack has actually gone. And we don't exactly know who all has been affected either, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, this is going to be something that they're going to be dealing with for a long time here.
Yeah, so it sounded like they actually got in and modified source code for SolarWinds, and then that code then was "quote unquote" securely distributed to all these agencies. So they effectively poisoned the well, mm-hmm. And then once the well was poisoned, and then all these agencies then drank of it, so to speak, they had kind of some sort of back end access then into their documents. So it's kind of I mean, it's kind of clever, right? But
Yeah, I mean, it's really clever social engineering in a way that, like, if you can get one infected, like at the source, then like you get the rest of them. So you're not socially engineering everyone. You're socially engineering one person or a smaller group of people to then distribute your backdoor, essentially, is I think is what happened here.
did you just talk about
Yes.
setting my back door?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I just want to make sure I followed that. Well, you know what? Let's take that offline. That's such an officeism, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, let's take that offline. What does that even mean? So thanks for that. And I guess in other somewhat interesting and depressing news, there's been a lot of news around Parler, right? So Parler is both loved and hated depending on your politics. I don't really care. What I find is interesting about this is Parler. The tech community has really kind of turned their back on it, right? And in doing so, it actually kind of left them vulnerable in a way. So first, I think it was like Apple said, "Hey, you know what? You don't have a mediation strategy, so we're going to pull you from the store." The other thing that I heard was like you saw Amazon, right, saying, "Hey, you're hosted with us, but Alakazam, you're not." And so there's really kind of two pieces of this. Like one is it's kind of fascinating, but not. I don't know. I would argue not in a good way. That if tech doesn't like you, they will shut you down. And there are some safe havens. It sounds like Parler, like their domain has been transferred off to a host or a domain name management system that is favorable to them, and has promised not to let anything happen to them. But we're really in this day where there's some big players that typically you're involved with, right? And we've encountered this too, where it's like, well, you need to be on Twitter. Well, you need to be on Facebook. You need to be on like all these big platforms. But when it kind of starts collapsing around you, and that's never happened to us, thankfully, it's like, what do you do? So on top of that, then as as Parler has basically been squeezed out, they effectively threw their hands up, and understandably so. But they left like their data kind of just sitting out there, right? They basically shut down the site, and no longer did you really need an admin portal or some sort of like back end access that was secret. All the data from all of these past posts and the user data, like all the stuff was just sitting out there. And so in this story, they really talk about really the GPS data then. So what's happened is then quote unquote hackers, which I would argue is not really fair. I think if you go out and just data mine something off of a website, that's hardly hacking, right? But hey, whatever, I'll let you have your term. But they basically archived all this data, and when they started going through it and performing some analysis against it, because you have a massive amount of data, like of course you're going to try to perform some analysis. What they started finding is GPS data, right? So where some of these posts were, some of the people that were users, where had they been? And this story really, the story that's on Gizmodo is really focused on, okay, well, how many people that were on Parler were part of like this kind of capital invasion or whatever you want to call it. My concern again, I mean, I think that's hate. I hate that. I think that was a terrible moment in our history. But that being said, really my focus here is what the thing that gives you shivers all the time, Neil, and it's all this data is collected. And even if it's not particularly useful in the existing application, you never know how that's going to be used later that you're not expecting it, right? And so I'm sure you saw this and it probably made you turn cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few things there, but I'm going to address that one in particular because I am the privacy person, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this just goes towards that, and that like when you give away that data and you agree to a privacy policy and you allow applications and websites to use your location, you are giving them permission to do these types of things. and you're opening yourself up because, as we have seen, no one is immune to a hacker or data getting leaked or something along those lines, right? So like, you're opening yourself up to all of those things. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. Like, I'm not here to tell you like, here's what you should be doing with your data. Here's what, like, no, like that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want you to be informed that like, these are the types of things that can happen with your data if you are allowing companies and sites and apps to actually use that data. And you have to agree to that. There are protections there for you. You have to agree to it. Now, some apps will force you to agree to it if you want to use it. But yeah, I mean, you are accepting that. That is something that you are giving them the right to do. Like you are waiving your right essentially to privacy when you do that.
In similar news, you probably saw WhatsApp was kind of in hot water, owned by Facebook. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but I mean, it's definitely their right as a company, right, to release a new privacy policy and a new data management policy. And they said, hey, we're going to be sharing stuff with Facebook. And they were a little bit maybe obtuse in delivering how and why they were going to do that. And they've now had to go back kind of on the defensive and say, whoa, we're not sharing your messages with Facebook. But it raises the issue, right? So, I mean, these are the things that kind of keep coming up. And just because they aren't going to do that now, so to speak, Facebook owns them. They can compel a lot of different things. And if they go belly up, much like, again, what we're seeing here with Parler's data, what happens, right? Where does it all go?
Yeah, it's sitting on a server somewhere, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I know I hammer home privacy a lot on this show, but it is an important topic. It is something that, myself included, many people do not take seriously enough. I may talk about it a lot, and I may know a lot more than some people, but that does not make me an expert on it by any means. And I mean, there are apps on my phone that I let use my location, right? Like, sure. So again, like, it's up to you. I'm not trying to push you one way or the other, just trying to help inform you. So
it's good. It's just good to be aware, right? With anything, right? I think informed consent is one of the things that you've talked about a lot. Yeah. And so it's better to know than just to hope and then be disappointed later.
Right.
In more joyful news, I hope more joyful news. Nvidia, right? We're starting to see some of their chipsets make it into kind of like OEM laptops and desktops.
Yeah. So this is really, really neat. In that these new chips that Nvidia has pumped out that are miles ahead of their previous generation are actually going to start coming to like actual gaming laptops and things like that, which when you look at how big they are is a little insane, but it's actually at a pretty good price point too, which I think is really cool to think about. So the 3060, which is the lowest in that in the new tier, are going to be coming in laptops starting at $1,000, which is salty. But when you're looking at a nice gaming laptop or a nice gaming, like even rig, like that's really not too bad. Like,
no, you're getting off easy in my books.
Yeah. And so those are going to start rolling out. Those are going to start when I just had it, January 26th. And then the 3060 are going to be coming out a few days later, on February 2nd. So they're all coming out soon. So yeah, I gave you the price for the 3060s. They're saying that those are going to be 1.3 times faster than a PS5 in a laptop, which is significant, like very significant. So the 3070s, which is kind of your middle tier, is going to come in at right about $1,300. And they're saying that those are going to be 1.5 times faster than previous 2070 systems. So those are their last generation chips in a laptop. it's going to be 1.5 times faster. That's what they're saying. They're also saying that that'll be 90 frames per second at 1440p, which is insane.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then their highest tier is the 3080, and those are very pricey because they're in very high demand. But they're going to begin at around $2,000, which they're saying that it can deliver 100 frames per second at that same rate of 1440. So this is really, really neat. They're saying that there's going to be some AI pieces that are going to be like shuffling resources around, like power resources between the CPU and the GPU. So an AI is going to be kind of controlling that and to keep your heat down as well, because these things are going to be hot, as all gaming laptops are. But yeah, they're also saying that this should be powerful enough to do Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is like one of the most demanding titles out there right now. And that's the 3080 version. Sorry, not the low version, but their highest version should be able to handle the Flight Simulator, which is very, very impressive. So yeah, these are very neat. I'm excited to see how they actually perform in this, because they are ridiculously large, and they consume a lot of power, so it's going to be really hot. But yeah, I think that this is really neat. I like the price point that they're coming in at too. It's not so ridiculous that people are just like, well, just go build a PC, which is kind of true. Still, you're paying for portability with laptops, but I think this is a really great option for somebody who travels a lot, who wants to game while they travel, whether they're on like a work conference or something like that. If you're traveling, you could take this with you, and you could still game pretty much anything that you want to. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how loud these things are.
Yeah, they actually said something about that there are going to be different levels. Let me find that. Yeah, there's going to be different like modes. So there's like Whisper Mode 2.0 is what they're saying. And so you'll be able to choose different acoustic levels, and the actual AI that manages everything is going to be able to manage the fan speeds and the game settings, stay at that sound level. So it's going to stay base level at your sound that you want, and then it'll adjust like the in-game settings and your fan speeds to stay at that level.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's pretty neat. I'm interested to see how that works though, because like, what's going to happen if it just gets really hot all of a sudden? Are you going to start dropping frames, and then like, is it just going to like, are you going to lose clarity of your picture or your game detail? So it'll be interesting to see how that works, but I think it's still really, really neat that yes, they have thought about how loud these things are going to be. And they're trying to address that via an AI, which I think is really neat as well.
Well, that's cool. I'll probably avoid it, but I am interested that whenever all the miners and everybody else has had their pick of all the damn cards, maybe I can get one and actually put it in my desktop machine. But I'm not going to hold my breath, Neil.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Mostly because I hear it's not good for you, holding your breath. Like, that sounds awful.
Right, it does sound awful. Well, with that, that's all we have for this edition of Tech Talk Tuesday. If you want to read up on any of the articles that Matt and I discussed today, you can find them in the description below. And while you're there, how about you go ahead and give us a follow so you don't miss any future editions of Tech Talk Tuesday. We go live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Same time every week, everybody. So come join us, come chat with us while we're discussing the weekly news. And yeah, we can answer any of your questions. And if you want to have us answer any questions live on the show, you can hit us up on Twitter. Matt's Twitter handle is the Matt Ray, because there's only one. And mine is Neil Tardy, because I'm boring. So thanks for joining us on this edition of Tech Talk Tuesday, and we'll see you next Tuesday.